What's going on, guys? So in this video, sorry, forgot to take a sip before we started. I want to start getting into communications for the armed prepared citizen. So this is probably going to be multiple installments and parts, because I don't want to drag the whole thing out too awful long. It'll be easier to compartmentalize them into separate ones. So consider this kind of the intro and overview video. So a couple of things up front just to get things going. Communications for the armed prepared citizen in case of catastrophically bad times and events is extremely important. I sometimes wonder if people really understand just how important it's going to be for a lot of reasons. There's a lot of good resources out there right now that you can take advantage of that I strongly and highly encourage you to take advantage of, and we're gonna get into some of those. Now, I want to preface something up front. This is a topic and a subject that I know a little bit about. There are other people, and I stress I know a little bit about. There are other people who know a lot about this topic. Just for context and reference, I'm going to show you something that I normally do not put out there and talk about because it's often largely irrelevant and it doesn't affect what I'm usually trying to tell you guys or say one way or the other, okay? But I did graduate from signal school many moons ago, long time ago, galaxy far away and all that stuff, and I was first in my class. There are some basic things when it comes to communications that are constants and still the same. There are a lot of things that change, such as technology. Things are very different technologically wise now than they were when I got that. However much I know about that, people like my friend NC Scout over at Brush Beater know 100 times more. He is one of the resources that I cannot stress to you enough that you need to go to and turn to for information, okay? I am not an expert. I am making no claims to be an expert. I'm just giving you the context so that you'll understand that I know just enough to know that there's other people that know a lot more than me, okay? So, why should you bother with this? What context, all that good stuff. So, armed prepared citizen, we're talking about bad time situations, whatever acronym you want to put on it, WROL, SHTF, whatever. The situation is there's no calling the police for help. There's no functional system of government society. You got to do what you got to do to take care of you, yourself, and your own family of your own circle of family and friends, whether that's one other person or 50 other persons. Being able to communicate and having the equipment, the tools, and the knowledge on how to do it are vitally important. One of the biggest things up front, first and foremost, that you'll be using radios and that sort of thing for is primarily as an information gathering tool. You want to be able to listen. There's a lot of times in situations where you transmitting might not be a good idea. You might not have anybody to transmit to. But gathering information, listen to other people talk, can be vital. You can gather a lot of information. But it's not as easy as just turning on a radio and listening. You've got to know, A, how to find where people are talking at, what frequencies, bands, etc., and then be able to understand and decipher what you're listening to, whether it's somebody just talking normally, whether it's somebody that's using more detailed terms and acronyms, whatever. Think of it like growing food. You don't just stick a seed in the ground and voila, food pops up. There's a whole lot of other things involved in being able to turn that seed into actual viable food that you can eat and repeat over and over again. Communication will be the same way. Number one, primary thing is going to be listening, gathering information. It is an invaluable tool. You could be single, not have any family, not have any friends, not have anybody, but you can still use a radio to listen and gather information that could be key. Secondarily, obviously, is being able to communicate with other people, family, friends, whatever. That communication can range from something as simple as you've got to go get wood for the stove out from behind the barn out back. Say it's 100, 200 yards away. Even that little short distance is probably a good idea if you've got a way to talk back to your wife, children, whoever that are back in the house while you're back there doing that, in case something was to happen to either one of you. The cool thing about a radio is it's a tool to keep you from having to yell really loud. Okay, think of it in that terms. You will need, if this applies to you, again, it doesn't apply to everybody, you will need to be able to communicate with your family and friends in order to move from one place to another in these kind of situations safely. If you have any kind of decent sized group, property, whatever, in order to effectively secure it, you're going to need to be able to talk to each other when doing security and stuff. And security and stuff is not always like physical security as in protecting the place, which that's a big part of it, but it's also simple things as when somebody's out gathering food, tending a crop, hunting, whatever, being able to maintain contact back to wherever your main point of operations that is at, house, camp, whatever. It's vitally important from a security standpoint of actual security teams, and this is where a lot of people kind of get lost in the weeds on things. So transitioning into this mode, understand that as armed prepared citizens, you are not a military unit. You're not going to operate nor act like a military unit. You're not going to conduct things in the same exact carbon copy way as a military unit. You don't have the same resources and stuff as a military unit. And everything you've got is finite, so on and so forth. You're probably going to be working in much smaller numbers than a military unit. Therefore, you have to tailor this just like everything else we talk about. There are things you can extrapolate from how the military does things and then chop it up, tailor it, pick and part, and piece together your own deal that fits your situation, and don't just carbon copy what the military does or doesn't do. For example, most of the time in the military, if you've got a platoon with multiple squads and fire teams, each squad and fire team usually only has one or two radios per team. Everybody in the squad or fire team doesn't have a radio. That is going to be different for us. Every single person in your team needs to have a radio, because you're probably, unless you're just really, really fortunate I'm banking that most of you don't have enough people to send out multiple 4 to 6 man fire teams, squads, whatever, at the same time. You might be lucky, again, statistically speaking, to be able to scrounge enough people to send out a 2 or 3 man team by themselves at a time. Every person on that team needs to be able to communicate with each other and communicate back with base. So yes, in that regards, everybody needs a radio. Doesn't mean everybody needs to talk on the radio, just means everybody needs a radio. I see that getting put out there from some former military guys, and I'm not knocking them, but they're still thinking in things in terms of how a military unit is going to operate. And that's not us, okay? Again, that's where that context comes into play that you hear me preach about so often. Now, everybody needs to have a radio. You do not necessarily need to be able to talk a long way. A lot of times, it's going to be more prudent to keep your overall signal small. You don't want to send your signal out and be broadcasting any further than you absolutely have to. That's contrary to how a lot of people go, because a lot of people are wanting always the most power, the most antenna, the most reach. As armed prepared citizens, that's not always ideally what we're wanting. A lot of the time, we want to keep that signal really small so that if someone wants to listen to us, they have to get that much closer to us. And if we're pulling proper security, that's going to increase the odds that they get discovered. So it's a game. If you want to listen to me, you're going to have to get a lot closer to me and run the risk of me finding you. So in that regard, you're not always looking for the most powerful radio. You're always looking for the most powerful antenna. I will tell you, as a matter of fact, some of my circle of friends and I, some of our radios that we would actually use for security patrols, we actually used the little teeny stubby antennas on them, so that we just have inter-team communication ability without sending a signal real far out, and then have an extra antenna that if individually we each needed to reach back to the home base of operations, we could, but that's primarily only going to be one person in our team that will maintain that all the time. But everybody will have the capability of doing it. But the little stubby antennas that are killing our signal, something that we make use of a lot to keep everything nice and tight, keep everything closed in. That's where you got to have options. We're going to talk a lot about options coming up in subsequent videos on this. We're not going to get too much into equipment on this one, but there is one other thing I wanted to touch on real quick. Alright, quick interruption there because I kind of forgot to have handy what I wanted to show you, and I had to stop and go get it. So, bad on my part, unprofessional. Oh wait, that's right, we make no claims to be a professional here. Okay, so a couple of things that I feel like are an absolute must that you need to have for learning this stuff, doing this stuff, applying this stuff. First off, y'all have heard me talk about this before, and I'm going to keep talking about it. Get this book. Okay? Get it. Get it, get it, get it. I will put a link to it in the description box. I also encourage you to get this book. There is also a volume 2 out as well. There is lots of applicable information in these books that you will find very useful. Okay? And then finally, if it's at all possible and where you can, if you're in the region, I highly encourage you to go to NC Scouts RTO classes, signal intelligence classes, all of those. Those are highly valuable for you to be able to apply this stuff. Reading about it, learning about it is great, and you need to do that. Being able to get hands-on instruction adds a little bit more, and in some cases a lot more, to what you're reading, because it makes everything mesh in your mind when you're actually getting showed how to do it and all that kind of stuff. So I highly recommend those. Last but not least, we've primarily been talking about mobile handheld stuff. Depending on your situation, it might be advantageous for you to look into setting up a base station of some kind, again, primarily for listening, but also if there are other people that you want to be able to get in touch with further away, having a good base setup and radio antennas, everything that goes with that, could be extremely valuable as well. And that gets back into the part of, okay, we don't always necessarily want to reach out. Sometimes we want to keep that signal small, but other times there might be somebody specifically we want to talk to and we might need to reach out. If that's the case, then there's a lot of things you need to take into consideration and figure out and learn. It takes time and practice to do it, so you have to get out there and practice and do it, okay? So we're going to wrap that up for this one in part one. I will get on part two and look for that, I don't know, a couple of days after this one. Depends on how quickly I can get it recorded and how quickly I can get it uploaded and all that kind of stuff. So, as always, guys, get ready, get prepared, train, practice, all those things, and don't just train and practice on the fun party fools. These tools right here might be equally, and in some cases even more important. Lots of things you need to learn how to do and to use, okay? Take care. I will see y'all in the next one.